All right, I have 12 o'clock exactly, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I see people are starting to come in pretty quickly, so I'm sure as we go through these introductions, we'll get a pretty full house momentarily. So good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the National Black MBA Association, I'd like to welcome you to part three of our five-part HBCU Career Crash Course series. We're very excited to have you join us this afternoon and hope that you all are remaining safe. My name is LaPray George, and I'm the Senior Director of our chapters, members, and university relations here at the national headquarters of National Black MBA in Atlanta, Georgia. Here at National Black, we recognize HBCUs as a true source of academic accomplishment and great pride for the Black community, as well as the entire nation. We're here to support you by providing opportunities and exposure to resources such as this to assist you on your educational journey and as you prepare to enter the workforce. Over the next hour, you'll hear from our subject matter experts as they share useful and important information on using technology to your advantage and mastering your upcoming virtual interviews. Before we jump into the specific content around today's webinar, I want to remind you all that we are very excited to host our 42nd annual conference and career fair in just a few months. This year, and for the very first time, we're going to host the event in a completely virtual format. We've been working extremely hard to bring as much of our traditional conference experience into the virtual world. So the information we share during today's crash course is really designed to assist you as you get ready for that journey and making sure that you are as prepared as possible. For those that joined us last month, we provided personal and career assessment tools along with an amazing resume workshop. Keeping in mind those tools and things that you need to be successful today, we're going to continue along that same path. And to demonstrate our commitment to you all, we're going to actually provide you with a $25 discount off your conference registration. So if you look in the chat right now, there's a promo code that you can utilize to receive that discount. And there's also a direct link to the conference website to learn more about the conference agenda, some of the companies that will be there. You can even explore the virtual format to get familiar with that so that when you do join the conference in a few months, you'll be fully prepared, not only with having these tools, but also knowing how to navigate the virtual format. So please make sure you check the chat box, copy and paste that promo code. It'll be good until, for 7 days. So make sure you take advantage of that over the next 7 days because it'll go away after that point. So $25 off, definitely a great incentive to get you guys to be a part of the overall conference. So as I mentioned, we got some great content in store for you all today. Our two workshop speakers will be Ashton Clark and Tondi Young. I'll introduce them both in a few moments, but before I do that, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Anthony Wilbon, the incoming Dean of Howard University School of Business. Dr. Wilbon completed his Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering at Michigan State University, an MBA from Howard University School of Business, and his doctorate degree from George Washington University in Management, Science, Technology, and Innovation. He also is the recipient of a Fulbright International Education Administrators Award from France. Prior to joining Howard, Dr. Wilbon was a faculty member at Morgan State at the Earl Gray School of Business and Management, and he also previously served in engineering and management level positions at several organizations, including Board of Governors at the Federal Reserve System, Booz Allen and Hamilton, American Management Systems, and Westinghouse Electrical Corporation. So with that, I will now like to introduce you to Dr. Wilbon to provide a few remarks on behalf of Howard University and National Black MBA. Dr. Wilbon, over to you.
Thank you so much, LaPray, and the National Black MBA Association for your forward-thinking and strategic approach to preparing your constituents for this digital world we're embarking on. Certainly, Howard will miss hosting you all this year for the conference in DC, but I think this virtual conference that you all are preparing promises to have some exciting opportunities for folks to connect and take advantage of the career fair that everybody's so used to, and assist with the job search that everybody's embarking upon. I appreciate what the National Black MBA Association has done over the years, and I particularly appreciate the commitment that you all are making to HBCUs and preparing students for this virtual event. I just want to say a couple of things in opening this. Of course, needless to say, we're in some very interesting times right now. There's a combination of events that are reshaping our world. We have a combination of geopolitical instability, with the United States foreign relations in a state of flux. We're in the midst of this public health crisis with COVID-19, in which it's changing the way we live and learn and work and communicate. The Black Lives Matter movement has taken hold of the United States and awakened the social conscience of the world as it relates to what's important to not only the Black community, but the community at large. And then lastly, as some of you all know, we have some, what I would call, I guess, leadership challenges in this country, which has resulted in some uneven responses to some of the issues I just mentioned. And fortunately, HBCUs and particularly Howard University is at the forefront of some of the solutions to some of these problems. I think the world is starting to appreciate the whole concept of diversity and inclusion, and the role that HBCUs have played for years in addressing the challenges of African Americans. And as it relates to business, the dearth of African Americans in the pipeline that leads to corporate positions and corporate leadership positions. So just to touch on a few things, in terms of the trends that we have in this country and as it relates to business and business education, as some of you know, there's been kind of an ongoing decline in applications to business schools. That's been happening for some time now. The University of Illinois just announced, I think last month or a couple of months ago, that they're closing their residential MBA program. But on the flip side of that, we've had an increase in the number of online MBA programs. For example, Howard, we just launched an online MBA program this past summer. And so we've seen a trend where the business education is changing, and the scope of it is changing, and the presentation of it is changing because the focus is more on online education. And with that said, there's been kind of an emerging trend in which we have to approach this. And one of the things that you're going to learn here today is that's critically important is everybody has to be comfortable with technology. Technology literacy and skills enhancement is a critical skill that everybody has to develop. There's a big focus, for example, on things like big data, artificial intelligence. Regardless of your discipline, you have to be able to collaborate and work in a technology environment. And so as business schools, we have been embedding that in the curriculum on an ongoing basis so that everybody gets some exposure to that. And the National Black MBA Association through this vehicle is doing the same thing. We have an increase in, for example, the concept of experiential learning, kind of taking the skills that you learn in the classroom and putting them into practice while you're in school so that you can jump right into the workforce and be prepared to make a contribution right away. And because of some of the issues that I mentioned earlier, there's been a great deal of emphasis in business schools on philanthropy and social impact, sustainable innovation, all of these things that are changing the way people are shaping their careers and focusing on where they want to go. And then technology and in terms of entrepreneurship and innovation have become important because as African Americans, I think it's important that we do things like start our own business, focus on new venture capital, innovation. We have to kind of build, and I think it's coming to the forefront now, build our own businesses and start our own corporations. And we have to kind of start by teaching students that in the business school. And of course, as I mentioned with our leadership void, we as HBCUs in general have always been training leaders in the broader society and particularly in corporate America. So I say all that to say that the combination of technology, market disruptions, geopolitical changes have changed the role of the business school. And at this point, the bottom line is it's time to adapt. We have to adapt. And we have to do it in a way that not only just prepares students for the current society, but we have to foresee what's coming in this complex business world and prepare students for what's coming, which means we have to be more creative. We have to be change agents as business students and as faculty. We have to be flexible, risk takers, team builders, but in essence, overall, we have to be proactive. We have to foresee what's happening, and we have to go out here and make a change. And so these types of webinars that the National Black MBA Association is preparing for us is the opportunity for us to take advantage of all the things that I just mentioned, learn in a virtual environment, be proactive in preparing ourselves for what's happening going forward and be innovative and making a change in society. So again, Lepre, thank you for giving me this opportunity, for sharing just a few words with you. I look forward to this webinar, and I think it's something that's going to be critically important for everybody to learn to help build their career, demonstrate how they can actually navigate in this virtual space as they do their interviewing process, and to give and for this webinar to give you constructive feedback and insight on how to go about this process. So again, thank you very much. I look forward to sitting on this presentation. And of course, Howard University will always be a strong collaborator with National Black MBA Association, and we'll do whatever we can to help support your mission. Thank you.
Cannot thank you enough, Dr. Wilbon. Thank you as well. And I should also add, Howard University has been a very strong partner of National Black MBA for quite some time, offering scholarship dollars to our student members, as well as engaging in a variety of ways with our local chapters. So again, Dr. Wilbon, thank you very much. And one thing that resonates with me within what you said, there were several things, but one thing that stood out towards the end was around being proactive. And I think the fact that those of you that are tuning in today, you're demonstrating your proactiveness and wanting to excel and using these resources to your advantage. That's exactly what we want you to do. So again, Dr. Wilbon, thank you very much for those awesome words. Before we dive in, I want to remind you all that you can certainly be engaged with us throughout the presentation today using the chat feature for general comments, but more importantly, the Q&A feature if you have specific questions for our presenters. So take notice of where those options are within your platform and how your screen is set up. And again, make sure that you enter your questions in the Q&A. We'll have a time at the end for your questions. There may be a chance to answer questions during the actual presentation, but we'll definitely get to the questions by the end of the event today. And if you have general comments, again, use the chat for that, for just general comments. I've also added, again, the link to find out more about our conference in the chat option, as well as a link for the promo code to receive a discount on your registration. Okay, so we are going to dive into the presentation now. We're going to hear from our very first presenter, Mr. Ashton Clark. Before I turn it over to Ashton, I want to do a quick intro via his bio. So Ashton Clark, I've known him for a few years now. We work together on a variety of events. But Ashton Clark is a storyteller, a motivational speaker, IT leader, entrepreneur, nationally award-winning entrepreneur. He first started his successful web-based business at the age of 13 and leveraged that success to launch several others, including Equity Twins, which is a real estate investment firm, and Ticket Falcon, which is an online registration and management service with instant payouts. Before launching Equity Twins, Ashton managed digital IT at Miller Coors. Prior to Miller Coors, he worked at Accenture as an IT strategy and transformation consultant. Ashton is an alumnus of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management. At Kellogg, Ashton earned the Dean's Distinguished Service Award for his tenacity, commitment to scholastic excellence, and most importantly, community impact by recruiting over 20 Black students to Northwestern's evening and weekend MBA program. Ashton currently serves on the board of directors for the National Black MBA Association and People's Music School in Chicago. Ashton's also a proud member of the 100 Black Men of America in Chicago and the illustrious Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So with all that being said, I would now like to turn it over to Mr. Ashton Clark. Ashton?
Thank you, Lepre. I appreciate it. I hope everyone's doing well. I know we're probably all across the country, if not even abroad. So I hope everyone's well, especially during these times. If you don't mind going to the next slide, Lepre, I'd appreciate that. So let's just get into this. This is an exciting time for me because, I am all for all things virtual. And in fact, when I was an undergrad, I think that was really one of the main times in which I had to figure out how can I do things without meeting people in person, because I was an undergrad. You might have a nice weekend, may not feel like going to a meeting early in the morning, but virtual allowed me to basically get the work done without having to be there in person. I think that is super relevant to today, especially since, as Dr. Wilbon said, we have to be able to manage this change and be able to do well in spite of what's going on. So today in my presentation, what you'll learn is how do you maximize your productivity in the virtual classroom? How do you make the best of virtual networking as well? And then at the end of the day, when we talked about the conference that's going to be virtual this year, how do you master that virtual interview? Because I think there are in some ways that it could be a little bit different than it is in person. And then when you have that interview, how can you land the job. I mean, that is super important. And so we go to the next slide. We'll just continue down this path. If you have questions, feel free to use the chat to be able to answer any or ask any questions that you have. So Lepre did a fantastic job of reading my bio, but I want to make it very clear. I am from Chicago. Okay. This picture is a little bit misleading because it's from New York, but I am a Chicagoan. I mean, I've worked at companies like Accenture, Miller Coors, Molson Coors, and now Starcom, which is in the media and data space. And from an entrepreneurship perspective, as Lepre was mentioning, I started a shoe company when I was 15 years old. And my brother, and I have a twin brother, by the way, we have a real estate business called Equity Twins, and then our event registration and management platform called Ticket Falcon. And that's kind of what I do. And so I'll go past this slide and go into the core content of this presentation, Lepre, if you do not mind. So first, we're going to talk about maximizing your productivity in the classroom. So what does that mean? In the next slide, we're going to show what that entails. So think about this, right? Most, if not all of us, are virtual. We have to figure out how to use tools and technology to be able to conduct our business. And there are platforms out here such as Google Meet, Zoom, Teams, Uber Conference, WebEx. I mean, there's many that I haven't even mentioned as well, like Blue Jeans as an example, but there are lots of technologies that exist to help us to ensure that we can have meetings, talk with one another, and just progress the project work that we have going on. Given that we're all virtual, there are a lot of benefits to this now, because especially when I was first starting, and I'm not trying to date myself, I mean, we didn't do a lot of video conferences. It was mostly conference calls, right? But now you have the video element, which I know can be nerve-wracking for some, but it also helps to, personalize things. So what are the benefits? I mean, you can meet with your team members and work on projects, but what's also most important for me, and this was a rule of thumb for me when I was in college, was how can I meet with my professors as well as my teaching assistants? And so I think by using these technologies, you should be able to find ways to meet with them if you have questions, because if you don't ask, you'll never know. The other thing too is some of these meetings, we talk about a lot of things, right? Even the meeting today is being recorded if you weren't aware. And the power of that is that you have the ability to go back and look over something that was discussed. And that's powerful, because in-person meetings is a little bit difficult, right? Because unless you have somebody writing down everything or you have a recorder in place, you may miss something. So that allows you to go back and recap what you've discussed in that meeting. And another key feature that I think is super important is the technology today allows voice to be transcribed. So imagine if I'm speaking and now the computer, through all the technology that exists, is writing down what I'm saying. I mean, the technology today even will be able to indicate certain action items that were called out in a meeting. That's super powerful because it automates the tedious process that often comes with note taking. Now, I want to be clear, it's not replacing it, right? Because I think the notes that you may take on your own may not necessarily compare to, an AI-enabled note-taking platform, but it at least helps you in that way. And then imagine you're working with your team and there's some type of mathematical equation that you're trying to figure out. Well, this technology has a whiteboard. I mean, that's powerful because the whiteboard will allow you to express your ideas, but that will be recorded as well. So you can go back to it and look at what you've worked on in the past. So what are some best practices? Now, this is hard, and something that I've had to continuously work on is focus on the camera while speaking. Now, this is a challenge for me because sometimes I have 2 or 3 monitors and I might be looking to my right or to my left. But it's just when you're in these meetings to seem engaged, and I hope that you are, look at the camera as best as you can. And also maintain a strong voice. I mean, it's super important that people can hear you and that they know that you're fully engaged. So be sure to do that, because I think that will go an extremely long way for you. And also be present and mindful. I can tell you how many people I've seen that are in a meeting, they know their camera is on, and they're just having a whole nother conversation with somebody over here. I could tell you, now that's not engaging. That's actually misleading and kind of messed up, because it's like, we see you. We see you. So with that being said, be aware of your surroundings and what you're conveying, because people are observing that, and you don't want to have a reputation of being in a meeting and not paying attention, right? And the other thing too is tailor your background to the meeting. Now, my background is a wall, and that's perfectly fine, but they have backgrounds that you can upload into Zoom and Team and all these other platforms. But just be aware of that and put something up that is representative of you in the meeting that you will be attending, and frame yourself wisely. Now, you can see I purposefully try to make sure that I was in the center of this frame while I look at the camera, right? Make sure that you're not over to the left or the right, that you're in the center so people know where you are and that you're participating. So Lepre, if we go to the next slide, please. Note-taking technology. I mentioned a little bit of this earlier, but when I was in business school, I remember I took a business law class, And the professor was going, I mean, I had a hard time keeping up. But this was what, in 2016? And what I realized is that platforms like OneNote and Google Documents and Evernote all have technology built in to help automate that. And I'll use OneNote as an example. What I would do is, I asked for permission, of course, is that in OneNote, you can record while you take notes. And so what's happening is that as the sessions are going on and I'm typing, the typing is basically being timestamped to the actual recording. So if I go into the actual OneNote document and I think I missed something, all I have to do is click on that text and it will go to the recording and allow me to listen and fill in any of the gaps. And I think that's super powerful for in-person meetings. But even if you're having a virtual meeting, there's ways that you can leverage that technology too. But even more so to today, since we're virtual, think about how you organize your notes. When I was in school, I would organize my notes by class and then by project. And this is powerful because even today, if I had a question about accounting, which happens from time to time, I can go back to my notes. And it allows you to have this recorded and saved in a way that you can use even beyond the class, right? You can annotate slides and documents. That's powerful too, being able to write on them and take screen captures and put them into your notes, because now you're putting the information in an area where you could leverage it the most. You can automatically save your notes to the cloud. And this is what I was mentioning earlier. Like, imagine like school's over 3 years from now and you started your own business and you have an accounting question. Well, now you have notes that you took 3 years ago that you can go through with the recordings that can give you all the context that you need to be successful from an accounting perspective. You can create to-do lists as well as color coordinate your notes. And I'll tell you, that was a new thing for me because I wasn't big on colors, but you best believe I use every color in the spectrum so I can know what this note goes towards, this class and that class. And even in some of these platforms, you can actually indicate certain key points that were made, and then you can filter on them. I mean, imagine if you have a test and now you've taken all these notes and you filtered on all the things that your professor said could be a test question. It makes your life a lot easier, right? And so if you think about the audio recordings I mentioned before, you can link them to your notes. You can sketch or write by hand. So if you have a tablet, imagine if you like to handwrite things, you can use that to your advantage. And then you can access notes from any device. Imagine if you're just outside in New York in Central Park or something like that, and you just had a few minutes and you want to just study something. Pull it up on your cell phone, and it's right there. You don't need your computer. And then the other thing that's super important, and hopefully it's important for you, is your ability to share notes. I could tell you, and I'm sure anybody can relate to this, there's been a couple times where I wasn't able to make a class because of an interview or something like that, but I had friends, classmates who took notes and they were kind enough to share it with me. So imagine, right? Because I came from a school and a mindset where we all wanted each other to be successful. And that's how I think we should be looking at this. I mean, if we're all successful, everybody's better off. But if we have the ability to share notes with each other, imagine the ability for us to come down and synthesize those notes, because you can learn from other people. So I think that's a super important point as it comes to note taking, especially as it relates to technology. So if we go to the next slide, Labore, document storage and sharing. And I think for me, it's always been Google Drive. I mean, that's what I grew up on, especially as, you know, in undergrad. But you have Google Drive or Google Docs and Sheets. You have Microsoft OneDrive, and then you also have Dropbox as just 3 example technologies that exist. But I'll give you an example. When I was working on papers, I remember I was taking an African American studies class and I had to write various papers. I started putting all of these documents on Google Drive, or documents at the time. And I've been out of college since 2010. So if I go to my Google Drive today, all of my old papers are there. And if you think about that, that's powerful because it reminds me of what I went through to get to where I am today. And so you can leverage these capabilities and make sure that you always have access to that documentation. They have sharing capabilities. And I can tell you, when I was applying to Kellogg, one thing that I did, and I'm not ashamed to say it, I shared my essays with my mother. And my mother was actually able to go in there and correct me when I was a little off base. Sometimes you need that every now and again. But all of that was well recorded and documented within Google Documents, for instance. And I can go back and see all the history of everything that she and anybody else I shared it with provided. And I mentioned you can access your documents from anywhere too. But the interesting thing too is that, and now it's probably not as big of a deal, but especially when I was an undergrad, I couldn't send very large documents by email. That's where Google Drive came in. But for now, I mean, it's still important, but you have that capability too, where you're not clogging up folks' email boxes. And then this allows you to collaborate in real time. Like, the power of this is, imagine bringing in video, and now you're able to communicate and collaborate on a paper in real time, especially if you're working on a case. You can see where people are editing, what changes they're making. It's all in real time. That's super powerful, because that doesn't require you to be in person to be able to do this. So leverage technology to the fullest extent that you possibly can. And this goes to that, collaborate virtually. I mean, that's what we're doing now, especially during these current times. But the other thing too, I remember I was on a flight, especially when I was consulting and I had to work on a document. They didn't have internet on the airplane. Well, some of these platforms, if not all, allow you to work offline. And that was powerful because as soon as I connected to the internet, my changes uploaded back into the cloud and I was good to go. And finally, and I think a very important point that I mentioned earlier, is storing your documents post-graduation. I can tell you, I've searched for certain things in Google Drive or even OneDrive as an example, and it came up, and that allowed me to save so much time. And a perfect example is business plan competitions. As an entrepreneur, what I found, there's a little secret for those entrepreneurs out here, most of these business plan competitions ask the same questions. So what I did was I kept them on Google Drive. I did a quick search. I did a copy and paste, tweaked it a little bit, and I applied it to a new business plan competition. That's extremely useful and hopefully use that going forward. We can go to the next slide, LaPrey, please. So virtual networking. I'm going to leave a quote with you. All right. Now I want you to write it down. I'm going to say it twice. Networking is one letter away from not working. Let me say that again. Networking is one letter away from not working. The whole purpose of this particular slide is to show you that virtual networking, I don't think is ever going to go away. This is our new normal. So how do you do it? I mean, because if you think about it in person, I mean, and some people are introverts, some people are extroverts. And so depending on where you land in that spectrum, you may have an easy time being in a room with people and networking, or you may have a more difficult time because it's not something that you prefer to do. But in the virtual setting, I think it's a lot different and provides many more opportunities. But to do that, you first have to develop your strategy. I mean, who do you want to network with? And I think this is so interesting because especially with platforms like LinkedIn and other social media networks, I mean, you have the opportunity to reach out to folks and get to know them on a professional basis. Are there specific industries that you want to target? Like if you're an entrepreneur, are there 4 or 5 entrepreneurs that you would just appreciate having 10, 15, even 20 minutes just to speak to, right? Or in any adjacent industries that can help you and be of value to industries that you want to go into. Putting that strategy together is very valuable for you because then you can start to execute it, right? And another key point too that I think is super, super critical here is network when you do not need it. So many people network when they have a problem. Like they may have, lost their job or something may have happened and they start reaching out to folks. And the reality is that there are people are kind, okay? I like to think that people are kind and people will help, but you're gonna have a lot more success if you start to cultivate that network early on and then reach out to people when you could benefit from something that they may be able to help you with, as opposed to just saying, hey, I lost my job, can you help me? The other option would be is you start to get to know them and then they already know you probably lost your job and can help you even proactively, right? The other option is that you can network on social media platforms. I mean, we all know about LinkedIn, and I hope everyone does have a LinkedIn profile because I think it's very helpful. But I've networked on Facebook. I've networked on Instagram. I mean, it's the platform shouldn't necessarily limit you because this is an opportunity for you to connect with others, but you have to be very cognizant of how you do it. And we can get into that too a little bit later, especially during the Q&A, but I would definitely take advantage of the social media platforms to be able to connect with people where they are. The other thing that's super important as well is to be able to connect, follow up, and foster the relationship. If you reach out to me and you send me one message, and then a year later you send another one, I'll remember who you are, but I won't know much about you. You have to foster these networks. I mean, these connections, they just don't happen overnight. You have to get to know people and put in effort. And because things are virtual, you can just set up a conference call or a virtual meeting such as this, and we can get on and we can talk and get to know each other and do that consistently. All it takes is 10 or 15 minutes. Networking should be mutually beneficial. Think about that, mutually beneficial. I don't think it's important to just network for myself. I want to figure out how I can help somebody else as well, such as if I've read an article, can I share that article with the other person and say, hey, I know you're in this industry and I read this, hopefully it's relevant to you, and maybe one day we can talk about it. I mean, that's how you start to foster relationships, by providing people with information and help that they may not otherwise have had from anybody else, right? And the last point that I want to make is you have to learn, tweak, and repeat. As you network, you'll start to learn what works and what doesn't. And you start to refine it and get a process down that works for you. And you have to be able to adapt your strategy at all times because things may change. Your interests may change. But if you remember these steps, I think you'll be put in a great situation and environment to be able to thrive in the virtual environment, because now instead of driving an hour and a half or however long to get to a networking event, all you have to do is get onto your computer or your phone, sign in, takes about 2 minutes, and you're automatically there. So thinking about the virtual conference. Now, I do sit on the board for National Black MBA, so I'm very well versed in what's going on. But this is a great opportunity. And one thing I did not put in my bio is that I used to be an undergraduate chapter president for the National Black MBA at the University of Illinois. And I would remember that we would take and fundraise and bring students to our in-person conferences. And the power that I want to make you, depending on, where you are, if you're in high school or college or even post grad school and all of that, or a working professional, there are opportunities for everyone at our virtual conference and career fair. I want to just emphasize that there's opportunities for everyone. But if you're looking for a job, let's start there. Register early. I believe LaPrey gave a discount code for $25 off in the chat. Use that. I mean, I don't think you're going to find a better offer like that, period. So use that and take advantage of that. Register early. When you register early, that's going to present a lot of opportunities to you. So with that being said, refresh your resume today or as soon as possible. You want your resume ready to go because you never know when someone's going to reach out to you. You don't want to be in a situation where you're scrambling, trying to get your resume together when somebody needs it because they're going into a meeting that could be highly beneficial for you. So have your resume ready. And then once your resume is ready, submit it to the National Black MBA Career Success Network for review. That's a great offering the National Black MBA has. You want to make sure that people are looking at your resume and giving you ways that you can improve it. Because you think what you have is great now until you see somebody else's who's gone through that process of refinement. So take advantage of that. And then after you do that, look at the conference agenda and make sure that you allocate time to participate in the virtual events and sessions. The career fair is one thing. Don't get me wrong. We're all looking for internships and new job opportunities and networking in that way. But the conference side of thing is phenomenal. I mean, the level of speakers and opportunities to discuss topics that are super relevant to us, that's what we do at National Black MBA. So find ways to build in that time. And given that this is virtual, I think it'll be a little bit easier to weave that in because it's not like you have to walk from this hotel to that hotel in about 5 minutes. You just click a button and you're in the session. The last point on this specific side is to familiarize yourself with the employers and the job opportunities that are available in advance. I cannot place more emphasis on this point. The last thing you want to do is get to this virtual conference and career fair and just think you're going to just figure it out. I mean, you could, but now you're wasting time because now you have to get your bearing straight on who the companies are. This information is made well in advance. And the reason for that is so that you can take advantage of it. And with that said, look at what companies or industries you're interested in. See who will be there. Learn about them, their employees, their mission, their goals, their job opportunities, and then create a list. And that list will be part of your strategy as you start to go into the virtual career fair. You'll know where to go first. And then have your resume ready. You've already submitted it to the resume drop that we have. But the whole idea is to talk to these companies and get interviews. But to do that, you're going to be best suited doing so in advance. And the sooner you can do that and put yourself out there, the greater opportunity the companies will have a chance to reach out to you. So one of the other things I think is super important as well is landing the job. I mean, landing the job is critical. If you're going to a career fair, you want to get the job, right? And so with that said, you want to be proactive. And I mentioned that in the last slide, but you want to know the companies that you're interested in speaking to, be proactive and reach out to them and submit your resume as necessary. Another point is to prepare a 10 to 20 second elevator pitch. Now, granted, we're going to have to imagine this being a virtual elevator, but nonetheless, it is a pitch. And this pitch is going to be, in a way, allowing you and enabling you to sell yourself, to tell others who you are, why you're of value, how you can create value for those companies and just be helpful to them overall. And also you want to know details about the companies you interact with. I mean, you have to study. And it's not like one of those things where you just look on their website for 5 seconds and that's it. Know their leadership team. Read their annual reports, their quarterly reports, especially if they're public companies. Get to that granularity because you need to understand what's going on, especially with COVID-19. How are they adapting? How are they evolving? I mean, how are they supporting the Black Lives Matter movement as an example? I mean, look into all that so you know what the company stands for. And one of the last points in this section is have a PDF version of your resume available, because you'll be surprised. You'll be talking to somebody, especially virtually, because you'll have the ability to chat with them, and they say, hey, I like chatting with you. Send me your resume. If you have it ready, bam, you're ready to execute upon that. You send them your resume, you're good to go. But if you don't, now you're going to be scrambling, and you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you could have a resume that doesn't fully represent you. And lastly, and I think this is also important, follow up. If you meet somebody in a virtual career fair, even if you're networking with somebody, send a thank you letter. But to do that, you have to get their email address. And don't be shy to ask for that. Just say, hey, it was a pleasure meeting you. I'd like to follow up with you. Can I please have your email address? Get the email address, send a thank you letter, and hopefully that will be a way for you to continue to interact. If you don't have their email, hopefully they're on LinkedIn, and you can use that as a way to communicate with them.
Ashton, great information all around. Cannot thank you enough for taking the time to go through each of those detailed steps and the various phases of this overall process, and especially wrapping it up and leading it all towards conference. That's really what this is all about, being able to use this information to be able to secure that internship or that full-time job. For those that may not be aware, this is being recorded. If you are a member of National Black MBA, you'll have full access to the recording as well as the presentation itself. So once this is done, if you want to go back, if you may have missed some of your notes, you can log into your member dashboard and you can find this and our other HBCU crash course sessions as well. Okay, so again, Ashton, great information. Can't thank you enough. We got some questions coming in the Q&A that we're going to hold off until the end of the session. So with that in mind, I would now like to introduce Tondi Young. Tondi's been a member of Google People Ops staffing team for 2 years, where she hires data scientists for various product areas such as geo, YouTube, search, ads. She's also served as the data science diversity champ for the last year, focused on driving initiatives to diversify data science at Google. Prior to Google, Tondi led recruiting globally for CPA Global, which is an IP software company where she served as a lead in the company's global Workday implementation and recruiting branding. She's also led hiring across a variety of disciplines, including engineering, client support, and legal. Prior to that, she led sales staffing, for Bloomberg BNA, where she helped to start the first sales intern program, first new grad sales rotation program, and she was awarded twice for her process improvement results in sales staffing and for revamping the company's sales onboarding process and new hire orientation. Tondi received her bachelor's degree with honors from Savannah State University and her MBA from Holt International Business School, where she studied and lived abroad in Dubai for a year. She was the recipient of Holt's 21st Century Leader Award and received an academic fellowship. In 2019, she was a panelist for the White House Initiative on HBCUs and has also been a recurring guest speaker and teacher at Holt International Business School. She's passionate about mentoring, coaching, and developing future leaders for tech, and especially passionate about HBCUs. As a native of Atlanta, Georgia, she loves to travel, concerts, and of course, going to the beach. So with all that being said, I now turn it over to Tondi Young. Tondi?
Hello, everybody. And LaPrae, thank you for that introduction. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. I have attended the National Black MBA Conference, have been part of chapters locally. And so I'm just excited to talk to you guys today. So let's jump into it. So what we're going to talk about today is interview preparation, how to prepare before you go to the interview. There is preparation work that needs to be done before you actually have your interview. We're going to go over some interview questions that I see as being frequently asked, so that you can have those questions down. You can prepare some answers ahead of time so that when you get those questions, you're not taken off guard and you're able to just go right into your answer. We're going to talk about some virtual interview tips. Some of these Ashton has covered. I'll cover some additional ones as well. And then we'll do Q&A at the end. So as LaPrae said, I think we got one question that came into Q&A, but we'll hold all of our questions till the end. Okay, next slide. All right, so a little bit about me, and LaPrae went over some of this information already. So I am an Atlanta native, born and raised. I'm now based in the Bay Area. I've also lived in Washington, D.C., and as he mentioned, abroad in Dubai. Some of the companies that I've been a part of prior to Google are Bloomberg, BNA, and Pfizer. That was mentioned as well. And yes, I'm a proud HBCU grad. What I didn't put in here is I'm also a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta. So if there are any of my sorors on the call, I just want to shout you out. And then Holt International Business School. Next slide. All right, let's talk about interview day. So I wanted to, you can go to the next slide. So I wanted to show you guys this visual because I was watching Trevor Noah a couple of weeks ago, and I noticed, so when they started the interview, Spike was like leaning into his camera like this, and Trevor had to tell him to back up. And sometimes we might have a tendency to do that, like when we're in front of our laptops and if we're having an interview. So I wanted to give you guys a visual, both with leaning into your camera while you're having an interview and also with lighting. So if you see the difference between Trevor Noah's lighting and Spike Lee's lighting, you can tell that one is a little bit shaded and one is not. So let's go to the after picture. So after Spike leaned back a little bit, the lighting is still a little bit dark, but you can see that there's at least some shoulder and head space that you can see in that particular visual. So I just want you guys to keep that in mind as you're doing lighting. I just want to show you something as well. So I'm in a very well lit space, but if I turn this off, you see the difference between not having lighting and having lighting. You see how there's like shade. You can still see me, but it's much better to see the person's face when you have a light. So you can get these lights on Amazon. They're selfie lights. You can put them in front of your computer. So if you're in a dark space, that will give you the opportunity to highlight yourself during your interviews. And I think that's really important so that you make sure the interviewer can really see you. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so let's talk about pre-interview preparation. So what's really important is, a lot of times I run into students and ask them what they're looking for, and they say anything. You don't want to be the anything job seeker. You went to school for a specific purpose, whether your major be criminal justice, whether it be business. There are some specific roles that you probably have interest in. And so you want to hone in on those particular roles, and then you want to look at the job descriptions for those roles. So prior to conference, if you see that a company that you're interested in has a specific role that you're interested in, you want to review that job description. And this is very granular, but it is important. You want to review this job description, and then you want to highlight your experience as it relates to that particular job. So for example, if you're looking for a sales position, let's just say you're a business major and you think, you know what, I'd be open to getting into sales. Then you want to make sure on your resume that there are some sales highlights. Maybe you did a sales internship, maybe you started your own business where you sold, whatever those things are that are relevant to that particular job, you want to make sure that that is showcased on your resume. It needs to be very clear in your first couple of bullet points under whether it be your internship or your business, but make sure that experience is there. As a recruiter, I will tell you when we're looking at resumes, we're looking at them and we're going really quickly, especially if it's at high volume. And so you want to make sure that everything that needs to be matched with that job description is there. You also want to research company and company values. When you get to a booth, even if it's a virtual booth at the conference, or outside of the conference, you want to make sure that you understand what the company is about. So, and this is going to come up on a later slide, but the person representing the company may say, why do you want to work here? And so you want to make sure that you understand the values and you understand some things that are important to you about why you want that company and not just because of the name of the company. Also, once you get scheduled for your interview, a lot of times the recruiter will tell you who the interviewer is. Not all the time, but there will be times where you know who that person is. So you want to research them on LinkedIn. I do this personally. I look at their background. I find commonalities. I've talked to people as interviewers and we both had some, whether it be a mutual connection or there's something that we did in our previous experience that was a match. And I'll make a note of that. So research the interviewer on LinkedIn, make sure you find some commonalities. If they're worth sharing, I would definitely highlight those briefly. Write down some of your success stories. So success stories are things that you've done. So like you won an award, you had a project while you're in school, you did an internship, you were recognized in some form or fashion. You want to write down success stories to share them at the interview. So what that means is that you may get a variety of questions, and we'll go over some of those during the interview. And they may be very open-ended questions like, what's your leadership style? Or how do you deal with conflict? And so these success stories will be able to help you answer those questions, whatever the questions are, with a successful ending. And so if you have one where you won an award and someone says, tell me about your leadership style, my leadership style is very collaborative. For example, this happened, and as a result, I was awarded. So that's what the purpose of writing down your success stories ahead of time, so that you know how to respond if you're asked these questions. Now, if it's not a formal interview and you're just having an informal conversation with a recruiter, whether it be at the conference or in other types of settings virtually, you can still share quickly. It's the same as Ashton mentioned in the elevator pitch. You can still sell yourself in an elevator pitch style by talking about some things that you've achieved. So we'll talk about commonly asked interview questions next, but you want to have answers prepared for that as well. So in essence, what I'm saying is that you want to anticipate everything that you might be asked, and you want to prepare as much as possible for those things. And prepare is not just you have to have scripted answers. Prepare means you want to know your background and your experience well enough so that you can sell yourself. That's the whole purpose of the preparation, is that I want to highlight the best and brightest things about my background. So when I'm asked these questions, I can like roll it off the top of my head. So you also want to prepare questions for your interviewer. So this is really important. This won't be about them specifically, but about the company. So some questions that you might want to ask are, what does success look like year one in this role? How do you measure success? And if it's a hiring manager, like, what is your leadership style? What is the reason for the role being open? Is it a newly created role, or was someone in the role previously? So there are some questions that you want to ask so that you understand like what the scope is of the role. I mean, now that we're all virtual, there are things to think about because just about everybody globally is working from home until January. And so you also want to ask, like, when it's time to return to the office, is your company planning to keep this role remote, or will there be relocation required? And if so, to where? So these are some questions you want to find out as you're talking to interviewers. The other thing is find a friend that you can mock interview with. So this is someone that may have recently landed a position. It could be someone that's a friend of the family, someone who's working in a company and they're a hiring manager somewhere, and they could mock interview with you. I've done mock interviews and they were extremely helpful. There are things that you might not be able to see when you're mock interviewing, that you need to see in a mock interview, like your facial expressions, your body language, if you're smiling, if you're sighing out loud and you don't know it. These are things that you really want to be aware of. So it's good to have a friend talk to you or interview you and give you some feedback so that you can course correct when it's time for your interview. And then when you get your notification to have your interview, sometimes there are specific things that you want to prepare for. I know, I can speak for Google in particular. There are specific roles that we have where you might get asked things around your knowledge about that role. And so when you're talking to a recruiter, it doesn't necessarily have to be our company, but it could be any company. You want to ask the recruiter, is there anything specific about this role that I need to prepare or do some research on that will be helpful during the interview? So just ask if there are some specifics, note those, and make sure you highlight those as well in addition to everything else. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so let's talk about frequently asked interview questions. I'm not going to go through all of these questions, but I wanted to give you guys an idea of what some of the most FAQs are. So what are your biggest strengths? These are more skills-based. So the hiring manager or the recruiter is looking to understand like what your strengths are. So if your strength is leading, if your strength is collaborating, if you're really good electronically, like you're great at putting together slide decks or with different types of electronic tools, then these are things that you want to think about before your interview. So if you're asked, you want to highlight those, and you want to highlight things that are specific to the job. So if it is a sales job, you want to highlight strengths specific to sales. What is your biggest achievement? That speaks for itself. Think about those. Tell me about a project you recently worked on. Tell me about a recent goal and a recent goal that you had and what did you do to achieve it? Tell me about a time when you disagreed with a colleague or a classmate and how did you handle it? I want to pause right there. In my personal interviewing experience, so I have interviewed with across the board, both startups and big tech companies. And this disagreement question has come up several times. It comes up in different formats. And so sometimes it's like, tell me about a time where you disagreed with your boss. Tell me about a time when you disagreed with a coworker. Tell me about a time when you disagreed with what was going on at your company. What the company or the interviewer is trying to discern is, how do you handle conflict? And so you want to think about that particular area of your work history and how in general you handle conflict. So for example, if you are in a situation where you're in a meeting and you call someone out in a negative way in a meeting, and that's the way you handle conflict, that might not be as positive as you pulled somebody to the side and you address the concern that you had with them. So those are examples when you're being asked about conflict that you want to think about. And so I would prepare some answers, as I discussed earlier, around these conflict situations. When have you disagreed and how did you handle it? That's really important. And what was the outcome? So these are some things to think about and jot down before you have your interviews. Now, you may not get any of these questions, whether it be for internships or whether it be for full-time positions. You may not get these, but you want to have them prepared, because at some point in your interview process, these questions may come up. So then there are, and that's called a behavior-based question, where you're giving a situation, a task, an action, and a result. And we're going to talk about that in the next couple of slides. And then you have open-ended questions. Tell me about yourself. This question is asked a lot, actually. I've been asked this question in the last maybe 3 or 4 years at an interview. And it really, I mean, it can come from the most senior person. They just want to know a little bit about you. So we're going to go over how you can answer the tell me about yourself question. And then these other questions: why the company? Why should we hire you? Why are you leaving? What is your leadership style? I touched on leadership style. Why the company? We touched on that in terms of knowing the company's values and their mission and what they're about, so that you can relay that information. So let's go to the next slide. All right. So tell me about yourself. So I'm going to give you some things that you want to point out. And then in the next slide, we're going to talk about a real life example of what that would sound like. So the person says, tell me about yourself, with no warning. You sit down in front of your camera, and that's the first question that comes out. So you want to talk about relevant skills. You want to talk about previous experience or internships. You want to share experiences you hope to gain in the future, your track record. You want to relate your response to the job requirements. You want to be short and concise, and you want to speak with confidence. Tell stories that stand out, and you want to show your personality. So you might not be able to squeeze all of this information in, but you want to have, it is very similar to an elevator pitch, maybe slightly longer. You want this interviewer to know why you're here in front of them, what are some things about you that they should know, and what makes you important and what makes you stand out. So that's really what you want to think about. Tell me about yourself. So I know I got this question many, many years ago, and the first thing I talked about was like, well, was where I was from. That's not what they were looking for. And so, you know, you want to know, like, you want to be able to convey things, again, that are relevant to the position, relevant to your skills, and why you are great at what you do and why you want to get hired. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, so here's an example. So the interviewer says, tell me about yourself, and you can respond with, and you can take this paragraph and rephrase it to fit like how you want it to, especially with the job that you're interviewing for. But in this particular instance, this person can say, I've worked really hard in my education, or I've worked really hard in my career, in my internships, to prepare myself to become a world-class accountant. I will be receiving my bachelor's in accounting from, let's just say, Howard University. I've already completed 2 internships. I did one at X company, and I did the other one in this last summer. And when I worked for the first company, I was in tax accounting. And when I worked for the second company, I was in audit. I earned the Intern of the Year award from the Chicago branch of X company this past summer by developing a new way to run annual audits. And I'm looking forward to learning more about this opportunity because it aligns with my skills and experience. So you can kind of remix that a little bit, but generally speaking, in this paragraph, you see that this person has called out 2 things: that they had internships, in their specific fields. They called out an award. They called out that they're a hard worker. And they called out like what they majored in and what they want to do. So these are some things that you want to think about. Now, let's just say you haven't had internships with big companies, but you've done, like, maybe you volunteered, or you worked for a startup, or you did some unique experience that you think would be very beneficial for the role. I would absolutely sell any experience that you have. Don't feel like if you didn't intern with a larger company that your experience is not as valuable. It is. So I want you to think about all of those things that you've done during your 4 years of school. And if you're still in school and you're going to be interviewing for internships this fall, think about the things you've done your freshman year, your sophomore year. Think about things you did in between high school and college. Like, did you lead a camp? Did you start a business? Think about all of these things that you may have done, and you want to craft that into the tell me about yourself. Ultimately, you're selling yourself to this interviewer with the answer to this question. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, so this is behavior-based. We're going to talk about behavior-based interviewing and answers. So the question a couple of slides ago, where we talk about, tell me about a time when you had conflict, you did well, you achieved, etc. So you want to use the STAR method in these particular with these particular questions. So anytime it starts with, tell me about a time, or tell me about, that's behavior-based, and they're looking for your past experience. So when you, in this particular instance, tell me about a mistake you've made and how did you handle it, there are 4 things that you want to keep in mind. So when you're doing your practice and your preparation and you're writing out your responses, you want to write your answers in these STAR methods, because it is really important that you capture all of these different areas. So, tell me about a time when you made a mistake. I was working for an intern at an events company. That's the situation. I was responsible for ordering floral arrangements for a private event hosted by a client. Unfortunately, I mixed up the information from the event and the flowers were delivered to the wrong venue. That's the task that was, not done correctly. Action: I admitted my mistake to my boss. I took a lunch break. I went to the other venue. I picked up the flowers, delivered them to the right place. And then the result was the client never knew about the mix-up and my boss was very grateful. The result could be all different types of things. It could be no one knew about the mix-up, but it could be that a success happened, or it could be that something happened that you weren't too excited about. But either way, you want to show a result and you want to show what the ending of that was. So keep that in mind as you're answering your behavior-based questions. You may get some of these when interviewing at the conference, or you may get some of these when you're interviewing with other positions, whether it be for internships or full-time opportunities. Okay, final tips. You want to test your lighting and background. We talked about that before. You want to confirm the interview format, time zone, and point of contact. So format meaning one-on-one, or will other people be on the video conference, what time zone it's in, who's the point of contact if something happens like a glitch or what have you. Have a backup phone number to call for technical difficulties. So make sure you give the recruiter your phone number in the event that there's something, that something happens with the technology. Test your microphone and volume. Make sure that the room is quiet so that there's no background noise. Ensure that there's good Wi-Fi in the place where you're having your interview, because that will impact your reception and you might freeze a lot. And that does happen sometimes with video conference. You want to dial in about 3 to 5 minutes early, and then you want to have your laptop power cord nearby. There have been plenty of times, I'm sure, where you open up your laptop and it's almost at low battery. So make sure that's there and ready so that it doesn't time out like while you're on your interview. And the last point, let's see, it's covered up. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I can't see it. So let's go to the last slide. Okay, so we're at Q&A. So I'm going to kick off the Q&A, and Ashton and I will answer questions. Or if you have questions also for LaPrey and Dr. Wilbon, we'll field those accordingly. So I'll start with Jonathan's question. How do you record audio in a virtual meeting and presentation? That's for Ashton.
Yeah, now it depends on the platform that's being used. Like I know Zoom has like a recording functionality where you can record it to your computer respectively. I'm not sure about other platforms having that functionality where you can automatically do that unless it's the event host. But there are ways that you can still use OneNote and other platforms to be able to ingest the sound from your computer. The quality may not be the best, but I mean, on the bright side, the best way to probably do it is have the meeting host across the platform record it so it could be shared with everyone.
Okay, great. The next question was, will companies at the conference sponsor work visa? I can answer that generally speaking, because I have gotten this question a lot. So most large companies will work with you if you're not currently authorized to work in the, no, I shouldn't say not authorized to work in the US. If you're currently authorized to work in the US, but you're on, let's just say a student visa, or you're working full-time at a company and you want to transfer like H-1Bs, for example, most companies will have some sort of resources to help you make that transition. It's not a guarantee. They have to do some background work and check, but I would not apply to a role because you require sponsorship. That's the end of it for me.
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well. When you go onto the conference website, the company listing will be there, and some companies actually indicate that they do provide sponsorship. And if it's not provided, there's often an access point or someone you can reach out to at that company to confirm if they do or if they don't. So we try to do our best to make that upfront as possible. But if not, you'll know what companies you want to work for, and there should be a contact person you can reach out to inquire and get that answer before you come to the conference. The next one, I'll let you go ahead and continue, Tandy.
Oh yeah, sure. Andrea says, is it safe to assume that most office positions are work at home due to the pandemic, and we can apply in or out of state wherever we see an opening? And that is it something we should specifically ask HR before applying to the position? So this is a great question. This is how I would use the pandemic situation and everyone working from home. As a general rule of thumb, if a position says, let's just say San Francisco, California, but we're all working from home, you can apply to that role, but just know that you'd likely be expected to relocate to that city after everybody returns to the office. So you can apply to any role that you want to in any state, but I would just prepare yourself to know if you want to relocate to that state. If a role is going to be permanently virtual, then it will probably say remote. It'll say 100% remote. If it has the city on there, then you'll likely have to relocate to go to that city once everybody returns to the office. So that's a good rule of thumb to use. I don't know if anyone else had anything to add on that.
Yeah, I might add some, because I'm all about virtual, because I believe that if you can operate in a virtual environment, you can do just about anything. But I definitely agree with what you said. But in some instances too, companies may start to be more flexible, especially as this goes on, because I can tell you, at least in Chicago, there have been companies where they have gotten out of their leases because they realize that they don't need the office space for all their employees anymore. And what they're doing is they're consolidating. So instead of having 20 floors, they may have 2. And those 2 shared floors would be for those that actually need to work in the office, and the rest would be meeting space that folks that are working reversely or wherever they are will utilize. So I think companies will have a shift there, but there will be some that are going back to the office, and you need to be cognizant of that, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're assuming that you can work virtually and then they expect you to be in San Francisco the next morning when the office reopens. So just be aware of that.
Yeah. And I do want to just point out quickly, we are at 1 o'clock. I want to respect everyone's time. We're going to continue the discussion to make sure you get all your questions answered. But if you do have to jump off, we do understand. As I mentioned, all of the content will be recorded and made available to you in your member dashboard. So if you're a member, you have full access to the presentation and the recording. If you're not a member, definitely sign up as a member. Undergrad students, only $30 for the entire year. Grads, $45 for the entire year. You get a conference discount for being a member and an additional discount for being a part of today's session. So if you have to jump off, we do understand, but if you can stick around and get the other questions, I'm sure there'll be something that probably applies to you as well. So I'll let you guys continue. I think the next one, Ashton, is pointing to you. The next question. Looks like it was from, I think it's Jen Ho, asking about, besides LinkedIn and alumni, you got it? Okay.
Yeah. So the question is, besides LinkedIn and school alumni, what networking platform do I recommend for students to expand their networking? So yes, absolutely networking. You can use Instagram. You can also use Facebook. But a lot of times too, I've networked during live meetings like this. So if you look at the chat function, someone has said something, it could be in a comment or even one of the panelists. And I'm like, wow, that was a great idea. So I send them a message on this platform that says, hey, I appreciate what you said. Would you be willing to spend a few extra minutes after just talking? And it's interesting to see how many new relationships I've acquired by doing that. But you just have to make sure you have a plan and you come correctly. But that's a platform that you should fully be utilizing if you can. And other ways too, I mean, if you're in other live sessions or other social media platforms, I would try to leverage them too. I mean, LinkedIn is one that's well known in this space. But like I said, Instagram and Facebook have messaging capabilities too. And you can use it if you definitely want to reach somebody.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'll add to that. And I've done the same thing. I was actually on and this Kiera has a question as well after Jonathan's. He asked about OneNote, but it looks like that was answered. Jonathan, did you get your question answered about OneNote? I saw that you said okay.
Oh, you can go and I'll answer it after you because I see it in this other area.
Okay, cool. All right. So yeah, but I would say the same thing as it relates to like networking. I was on a session a couple of weeks ago that was more like professional development related. And so a lot of us put our LinkedIn links in the chat. And so after the conference was over, everyone jumped on LinkedIn, connected, and then you can exchange information there. Or if there's something that you want to talk about, or just say, hey, if you need anything, let me know to follow up. So there are definitely ways to network while you're on on conferences or even if it's happy hours, et cetera. All right.
I thought I saw Jonathan's, but I don't. So if Jonathan, if you have that question, please feel free to submit it to us so we can answer it live.
Okay, we'll come back to it. Kiera, so your question looks to be very similar. Have you experienced virtual group networking or virtual networking happy hours? Do you have any tips? Yeah, I would say same thing. You can exchange LinkedIn information or contact information with people in the chat. So even if it's something as simple as, hey, I'd love to connect with people on IG or LinkedIn, and you put your information in the chat, and when people start to send you invites, you can connect with them and have a conversation offline. So that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, and to add to that, I've been in environments where it was definitely called out as a virtual networking event, and some platforms allow you to have breakout rooms, and so it automatically would generate new breakout rooms every 10 or 15 minutes, and that was a very quick way for us to, in a virtual environment, just connect with one another in either a one-to-one environment or one to very few. And so definitely take advantage of that, and if you have access to attending an event like that, do it, because the more you do them, the easier they will become. I promise you that.
Totally agree. All
The
right.
next, I think I can take this one. What will company booths be like during the 2020 career fair? So we will be fully virtual, as I mentioned at the top of the call, and it's been kind of discussed throughout the day. You can actually go onto the website under the conference page, and there is an actual demo where you can actually see what the career fair will look like in the virtual environment. So you can go in there, watch the video, and understand how to navigate that once you do register and be a part of it. But yeah, the booths will be set up in a virtual format. You'll see the booth on the screen. Click into it, and you'll have options to do a variety of things. You can request, you can actually ask questions in their chat feature. You can learn more about the company, a variety of things to do. We try to make it as comprehensive as possible and as similar to the real conference as well. And one thing I think Ashton mentioned earlier, the great thing about this virtual conference is that you don't have to worry about getting a hotel. You don't have to worry about your airfare or, getting to DC, which is where we would have been this year. You can literally sit where you are and log into and have far more access, I would say, in the virtual environment. So again, it will be as immersive as possible. It'll be fully 3D. Everything that you would imagine in the real conference will be happening right on your computer screen or on your phone or on your tablet. The breadth of companies that attend the conference, it's pretty much every sector is always represented, from government, nonprofit, education and universities, of course, various corporations that are Fortune 500 companies. They cover the gamut in regards to types of career fields. So HR, marketing, accounting, again, you name it, you'll definitely be able to find the company that will suit your needs. When you register, you'll be able to dive into the conference itself and see who's going to be attending, get a better sight of the actual agenda to see what's happening on each day. So again, whatever company you could imagine or industry you want to be in, I should say, there would definitely be internship and opportunities available for you to take advantage of those at the conference. I'll let you guys take the question from Tyrone.
Yeah, I'll kick off with this one. So what are the things that people do in an interview that isn't effective as they think, or that even hurts their chances of being hired? I would say one of the main things I've seen is people not answering the question that was asked. Be very careful about that. So make sure you understand what's being asked and you answer that question. Try to be as concise as possible. And believe it or not, I've seen feedback before that people are not nice during the interviews. I mean, I've seen people being combative with their interviewer. I've seen them being dismissive, over talking them. So you want to make sure that you're showing you want to be as present, as kind, as humane as you already are in person, but don't use the interview to be combative with your interviewers. That does come up.
And real quick, there was a link that was added. Thank you, Kim, for adding the link for the conference demo. It's actually right there. You can click on that link and get right to the demo itself. And I also added back, because it kind of got buried in the messages, the link to the actual conference webpage and also the discount code to take advantage of the discount for the conference registration.
Okay, we'll go to the next question. Does it matter whether you're a business major or not for the conference? Do you want to answer that, LaPray?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely does not. Every discipline is welcome to attend, definitely not just business. Again, refer to once you register or even before you register, go to the conference page, even look at some of our past conferences. We have on the website, you can see the last couple of conferences and see who was there and what they were there to hire for. Certainly will have far more than just business opportunities for you all to be able to take advantage of. So again, I recommend looking at the conference page, conference webpage, see which companies are there and take it from there.
Okay.
And
welcome, Jen Howe. Okay.
Looks like the last question. I don't see anything else coming in or in the chat. Email addresses to connect via LinkedIn. Absolutely. I'm sure you can find Ashton and Tandi with just their names on LinkedIn. But if you guys want to pop your email addresses in the chat, you all can have access to the emails as well, unless you prefer LinkedIn specifically. We can do it that way.
Yeah, I would absolutely say connect on LinkedIn, and then we can talk a bit further there.
Any final comments on the Q&A side? I think we actually got through all the questions, so I think that was a great job there, and just about 10 minutes over, but we're gonna keep rolling unless you guys have any final comments on the Q&A side. Covered everything pretty well. Okay. So as we wrap up, as you know, when you registered, we did a raffle for the first 25 that registered for today's session were able to be entered into a raffle for a gift card. So those 2 individuals have been selected. You'll get an email from us shortly later today. And then we're going to do another raffle for those that take the time out to do our after event or post event survey. So once the session ends, you'll get an email right away with a survey asking a couple of questions about the job that we did today, what things you want to maybe see in the future, ways to improve, just to make sure we're really doing things that are beneficial to you guys and some of the things that you can apply right away. So hopefully this was all very helpful, but if not, the survey is a great way to let us know what we can do to improve. And with that, again, on behalf of National Black MBA, I cannot thank you all enough for taking the time to join us this afternoon. I hope you felt the information was useful. I feel like it was. I know that when I was in school, things that I didn't know all were covered today. So I hope that you guys took that to heart and we use those things right away. I want to thank Dr. Wilbon. He had to jump off. He's the dean, so he's a very busy man. If you have any questions for him, you can actually email me and I'll be happy to send those his way. You can drop your questions or anything in the chat. And I'm also on LinkedIn if you want to send me a note there as well, just using my first and last name. But I'll provide Tandi and Ashton a chance to say some final comments. Tandi, you want to go first?
Yes, I was actually just adding my information in. The final thing that I want to say is just, as you go out and do your job search, be confident, be bold, believe in yourself. That goes a long way. The job search process is not easy. And so I just want to encourage all of you to keep at it, be persistent, treat it like it's a job. It's a job looking for a job. Put a lot of time and effort into your networking, into your follow-ups, and I promise you it will pay off. So good luck. I'd love to hear how all you guys did in your job search. So if you want to shoot me a note on LinkedIn and let me know how things turned out, I'll be happy to hear about your success and your results.
Yeah, and to add to that, I would say let technology be your friend. I know I covered a handful of topics, but there's so many other topics that we couldn't even get to today. Just figure out which technologies work for you and use them to your advantage, because at the end of the day, you want to work smarter, not harder. So as Tandy said, I would appreciate too knowing how everything's going. If you have technology questions or even more concerns about how you can use certain things, that's what I do. So I'm very happy to help. So reach out, keep us posted, and thanks for supporting our organization, because we have so many things that we are offering, and I hope that you take advantage of them all, because they're right at your fingertips. So keep us posted.
Absolutely. Again, thank my panelists. I cannot thank you guys enough for sharing with us this afternoon. The information was certainly useful, and I hope that everyone feels the same way. One last reminder, again, everything that we're talking about today and past webinars and future webinars is all leading to this, our annual conference. If you're looking for that internship or that full-time position, this is the place to go. This conference, this will be our 42nd conference. Over 200 companies will be in attendance, over 100 universities will be in attendance. We typically have about 10,000 or so people on site to take advantage, because again, it's the best, almost the best kept secret, if you will, in regards to places to go. Companies are there to hire diverse talent, to hire Black talent just like you. So why not attend this conference, again, from the comfort of your home this year, because it'll be a virtual event. Again, the link to find out more is on the screen, but also in the chat, as well as a promo code that will provide you all to receive a $25 discount on your registration to attend the conference this year. Again, on behalf of National Black MBA, thank you for attending the third part of our HBCU Career Crash Course. Our next session will be August 26th. So you'll again have more great content, which you'll hear about and see on our website, and you'll get an email as well because you attended this conference, this session. So please do the survey. The link is also in the chat feature, but you'll get an email after the webinar ends. And again, I cannot thank you guys enough. Please remain safe. Please stay healthy. And best wishes to you all in this upcoming school year. Thank you again very much. Tandi and Ashton, have a good afternoon, y'all.